If you want to have a crash course on philosophy and symbolism from a traditional Christian perspective, then this is a great book to start with and to check out. So stay tuned. Welcome to Biblical Occultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. I would really greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on X as well, and visit my merch store if you want to support the channel. In today's episode, I will be reviewing Meta-Narratives, Essays on Philosophy and Symbolism by Dyer, and it was published in 2022. It's a self-published work through iUniverse, and I will put my Amazon affiliates link in the pinned comment where you can go to my selected books, and I will include this one there if you want to get it through our associates link. Every book I review on this channel will be in that list. It's no cost to you, and the channel does get a small percentage of it and will really help the channel out, and I appreciate it. There are not a lot of books that kind of fill this space of basic philosophy narratives and solid critiques of modernist ideology. So it fits a nice little area there where you have either like classic philosophy books or you have very introductory books. But this is, in my opinion, kind of in the middle. And thankfully from a traditionalist perspective, which is also not very common. It is not an exhaustive book, and I don't think the author pretended it to be. I think it's more of a collection of recent essays, and also it seems to be older college level ones, like I did myself in undergraduate and postgraduate. I did a lot of essays, so it seems to me that Dyer is collecting a few of these works and putting them together kind of nicely to present the basic idea of meta-narratives, etc. So the topics are varied, but they all kind of fit the general topic, and I think they were organized very well. I do think some of them do show their age and relevance, but are very good, and I think the author may agree or may disagree with that point of view. But if you look at the structure and the arguments made on these essays, you can see some disparity, and I think it's primarily because of the normal development that one goes through as your formal education develops, and also as you're kind of forced to develop them live as you write essays through your education. If you look, a lot of the stuff I wrote during my undergrad and then look at the stuff I did in graduate and doctorate, you will see that there's a vast chasm between them. So it's only natural, but I do think these work very nicely together. To me, the most cogent and meaningful of the author's arguments and critiques is primarily his take on Aquinas, and obviously by indirect connection to Aristotle. Now, of course, I can't go into detail on these minutiae because I could do hours of this topic, but I do think that he is able to simplify a very complex issue in a way that is very efficient to most people to grasp. Now, I would say that I wouldn't categorize this book as an introductory book on philosophy. I do think that people that read this book should have some prior knowledge of philosophy, because if not, I think they would get lost in the weeds, and I think a lot of them would miss the very important aspects of the work, that they would miss a lot of the good arguments in the work. So I would suggest reading books on basic philosophy if you haven't done this already in your formal education. It would really help you out if you're interested in understanding these kinds of works. But again, the Aquinas topic, you have St. Gregory of Palamas that argued that accepting divine simplicity would eventually lead to atheism. And the author here makes that case over and over again, but I do think he makes it in a very efficient, simplified fashion. Even with all the normal jargon that is necessary to communicate philosophical points, I think he achieves it very well. And I think that's the most important and most significant aspect of the essays, because irrespective of whether or not they're atheist or not, if they understand that the basis for a lot of the atheism in the West is predicated on St. Thomas Aquinas, on these kinds of interpretations of Aristotle, I think it will go far to clarify the existential dread and collapse that Western civilization has been experiencing for almost 100 years already. Also, the critique of natural theology, which is, again, interconnected with Aquinas and his Ordo Theologica, is a crucial point, and it must be taken very seriously. If, as a Christian, you're supposed to understand that nature is fallen, then it is somewhat absurd to look at nature and claim that by the study of it, you can derive some kind of understanding of the mind of God, because nature does not really reflect the perfection of God's mind. But the basis of almost all occultism and esotericism in the West was predicated on this notion. So it's fascinating because it seems to be a conflation of God creating the world and thinking it was good prior to the fall, and then the fall tainting or somehow disrupting nature, and thus looking at nature will not really give us a lot of answers. Thus, natural theology collapses. And this is why the West has suffered so much, because if a Christian argues from natural theology, from the observation of nature, that X or Y is natural or good, they will be hard-pressed to negate the fact that there are plenty of horrendous things from their own point of view that you find in nature. And you either have to accept them as they are or claim that this is a disruption of nature. But you can't just have your cake and eat it too from the Western point of view, and only the Eastern perspective, which ab initio says that nature is fallen, and therefore you cannot use natural theology, the observation of natural law, to predicate an entire theological position on the nature of God, is in a better position to make the argument. So the West is trying to make a naturalist argument and combine it with a theological argument to try to find God through reason instead of finding God through revelation. There's a section in the book which charitably speaks of the powers of God himself being hypostasized, being personalized by so-called ancient pagans. I've discussed before how the term pagan is problematic, but it's needed in conversation because people understand what I mean, although it's somewhat of a problematic term. Although it is believed that a lot of so-called pagans believe that nature could be understood as a power that acted in exchange with human beings in a personal way. The argument being made is that they were just taking God's power from a Christian perspective, the Trinity, and then this Trinity is the one that has all these powers and manifestations, and the pagans are just interpreting these independent dynamics as different gods with personalities. But they're really just hypostasizing natural elements. But from my point of view and my particular perspective on this is that personalism is the natural inclination of human beings. Again, I'm not making a natural theology argument. I'm simply saying that from what I've studied, human beings tend to believe in a personal deity, and it is later on through the process of philosophizing, the process of deconstruction, of language analysis, that they start becoming impersonalists. This topic is discussed in a very cool chapter about cryptography, which is, to me, a very fascinating chapter, actually, because it contains a lot of really good information, a lot of good references. But his mention of the Vedic scriptures was fascinating to me because it is an area that I've dedicated a lot of time to, and there is usually a presupposition of most people that all of so-called Hinduism or Vedanta is impersonalist. But the truth is that of the 6 main schools, I'm talking about in the ancient world, it's really Sankhya philosophy that is impersonalist, because there were others that were personalist schools. And is really Buddhism, which is a sect that stems out of the Vedic world. As it returns to India, a lot of people converted to Buddhism, and it was Shankaracharya who was able to reconvert people back to Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism by convincing them that all that they found in Buddhism was found in Vedanta. And he is the founder of Advaita Vedanta. And most people, when they think of Hinduism, so-called, they think of Advaita Vedanta. And Advaita means non-dualism or non-duality. Interestingly, it's a negation of the primary belief, which is Dvaita, which is duality. Now, of course, this book of essays actually enters into this issue of the one and the many. Great philosophical discussion. It is found also in the Vedic world as Bheda Abheda, oneness and diversity, or unity and diversity is the same issue, the one and the many. So for people who are familiar with the Eastern Vedic conception, they will find these essays very fascinating as well, especially because you're seeing it from a Christian point of view, and that is very valuable. Now, as a Westerner, I agree with Jung that it is very difficult for us to comprehend the Eastern mindset. And I don't mean Eastern as in Eastern Orthodox, I mean further east, the Indian and Asian mindset. He makes a very interesting argument that our minds are incapable of understanding impersonalism and non-dualism, this kind of thing. Interestingly enough, I think it is probably a good thing because impersonalism is quite destructive to the mind. Personal opinion, but I think it is impossible for a human being to contend with oneness or absolute universality of this fashion without injecting into it some kind of dualism or some kind of multiplicity. And people that claim that it's possible, I think they are delusional. And if you look at all philosophies in the East, they all contain a form of dualism, a form of multiplicity, and they try to explain these things in a variety of ways. This book of essays will really give you a very nice Orthodox perspective on this. Although the book is not really primarily Orthodox, he has a lot of other essays there that you will be hard-pressed to know if the person writing them is some kind of hardcore Christian Orthodox. And I actually enjoy that because I was expecting a lot more of a theological work, and it's primarily a philosophical work. And of course, the book says it, but for some reason, I still expected the book to be a little different. So I actually was pleasantly surprised. So even if there are elements in the book that I may disagree with, it's a very enjoyable book. I want to quote a section of the book that I think is very interesting. Plato was wrong to disconnect the realm of forms from our world. Archetypal forms directly interact with the temporal realm through the ether, and the ether is itself a psychic, rational, energetic manifestation that includes actualities and potentialities that are not dialectically in tension. So in that section, it's a very good, small little paragraph that presents the main idea of a lot of these essays. A critique of Greek thought from a very Greek theology. A critique of Plato from the point of view of a complete separation between the spirit and matter, which I do believe is a great criticism and the source of a lot of hardcore dualism and of course also of Gnosticism. It kind of leads to that position at some point. The deprecation of material reality, the disconnect between the divine and the material, which is one of the things that I found very interesting when I first started studying Far Eastern theology, is because I saw in those systems an attempt to reconnect or merge together the material and the spiritual by claiming that they're not really that different. Now, of course, impersonalism, which is what I eventually found, is a denial of matter to such a level that is integrated into the spiritual, but in a subcategory, making it eventually to be illusory. In other words, it's not even an issue of denial, it's literally a negation of the existence of materiality itself. So to me, that's even a further attempt to disconnect and dismiss the very interesting connection between God, creation, and the energies and forces that interlock them. So to close out, the book has a lot of wonderful citations that will kind of encourage readers to dig deeper. So as a first attempt of this kind of work, I think it is well done. And hopefully he attempts to do a second or a third book on a series in which he has more recent essays that discuss this kind of thing. And it will probably benefit some people to have some kind of educational, explanatory introductions to the book, so that people that are not that well versed will be able to kind of navigate the book better. Again, for people who are familiar, it will be very enjoyable and easy to grasp, but there's probably a lot of readers out there that are not, so some kind of introductory essay would be a nice guide for people. So if you're interested in the topic, I suggest you get it. Check out my list in that link in the pinned comment, and please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. I would really appreciate if you do all of these things. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.